And let me reveal to you what I believe to be one of the most affectionate passages in the Bible concerning pets. 2 Samuel chapter 12, go down to verse 3. The poor man owned nothing but one little lamb he had bought. He raised that little lamb, and it grew up with his children. It ate from the man's own plate and drank from his cup. He cuddled it in his arms like a baby daughter. And so there, even in the passages of the Old Testament, we read that there was a unique relationship with animals beyond just a work beast or being used for food, etc. There was a tenderness between the heart of the animal and the heart of the pet owner. And many of you can identify with that. Now, I am going to pause in this teaching just long enough to give you a quick history of our dogs in our family through the years, because I think in fairness of teaching, I need to do this, because if you do detect bias, at least you'll have an understanding as to where that bias comes from. But our first dog was a female black lab mix that my wife rescued, and we named that dog Candy. And Candy made the journey with us from our move from Pennsylvania here to the state of Maine. And most of that trip, well over 1,000 miles, that dog, full grown, sat in my lap with its head on my shoulder almost the entire journey, as she was a little distraught leaving the only home she had ever known. She was the very first pet to enter our home when our children were young. She was loving and a loyal dog that quickly became a part of our family. And what was unique about our first dog, Candy, is Candy was the dog that took my wife to the school of how to thoroughly spoil a dog. Candy trained my wife completely, and Judy passed with 4.0 in how to thoroughly spoil a dog. And Candy lived 9 years and was the first dog that I had to bury under the pine grove in the first and front 4 acres of our property. Our second dog was a female golden retriever that we named Honey. And Honey was a very special dog and a gift from God to my wife. Honey helped to provide love and companionship in a very difficult time in my wife's life, and somewhat mine as well. And that was when our son grew up and went to college, and then shortly thereafter, our daughter went to college, and we entered into what many people call empty nest syndrome. Now, some people are happy to see their children grow up and leave home, but my wife's world fell apart when our children left home. I don't think any child in all of human history could have had a better mother than our children had in my wife, Judy. She was totally and completely devoted to our children. And I'm not laying this down as legalistic law, but in ministry, I always prayed that God would help this ministry and bless this ministry so that Judy, when our children were growing up, could devote her undivided attention to our children, because I felt a great cross in being gone so much as an evangelist in my travels all over the world. And I felt that in our home, and I'm just speaking on behalf of our home, but I felt like in our home, with my constant travels and journeys around the world and being absent so much from our home and from our supper table and from the activities of our children's life and their growing up, I really prayed that God would help us so that Judy could devote her full-time life and energy to the children, which is what we did. And we had to make sacrifices for that, but none of which either of us, I'm sure, would regret. But when Jonathan left home, and then Jessica, our daughter, left home and entered into Bible college, both of our children now are married in full-time ministry and have children of their own. But when they left our home, my wife fell apart. It was not uncommon to find her in the bedroom in the fetal position, crying and wiping tears. And Honey was a gift from God at that time, no doubt about it. Honey never left my wife's side and was her constant companion and walked her through some of that difficult season of life. And sadly, Honey only lived to be a little over 8 years old. And if my memory serves me right, she died most unfortunately somewhere around, in fact, it may have been the Mother's Day weekend. And I thought Judy's heart would never heal, and I thought her tears would never stop. She was inconsolable. When I buried Honey next to Candy underneath the pine grove in our front 4 acres. And I knew immediately what needed to happen, and I had already been doing some homework in the background as Honey became ill in that last part of her life. And I visited a breeder with Judy about an hour from our house. I want to say it was maybe the next day or a day or two right after we had buried Honey. And when we arrived at that breeder's farm, a little puppy, Chubby, another golden retriever, came running across the grass and rolled over on my cowboy boots and stared up at me with those little chocolate eyes and fluffy little golden fur and a warm, chubby pink belly, tail wagging. And I picked that little puppy up and hollered over to Judy, "Write the check, I'll be in the truck." And that's how Hunter came into our life. And he is our 3rd dog, and Hunter's still alive. Hunter's now 12 years old, going on 13, and has lived longer than any dog that we've ever had. And you could not ask for a better dog than Hunter. It's very sad to watch pets get elderly. His fur is now more white than golden. His back legs are getting tired. He can't go on the long walks that we usually take our dogs on once or twice a day. He is no longer able to do that, and he'll go on short walks, and we kind of let him dictate as to what he's able to do. He has great difficulty climbing the 2 sets of steps up to the bedroom where he has a home in our king-sized bed, and he's a full-bred golden that is what they call a hunting breed, which is the biggest breed of Goldens, and Honey weighs somewhere in the area of 120 pounds. He's a big, loving boy that has been well cared for, and thanks to my wife, too well fed. And if I'm going to be honest with you, there's never been a time that I have had to take either Candy or our 2nd dog, Honey, to the vet to face the end of their life that I couldn't think of at least half a dozen people that I could have put to sleep easier than putting my pets together. And I know that's awful. I know that's terrible. What a terrible thing for a minister, a man of God to say, but I'm just being honest. I could, and I think if I'm being really honest, half a dozen is probably a conservative figure of people I could think of that I could put to sleep easier than my dogs. As I'm speaking, I can think of at least half a dozen politicians. Well, Lord, forgive me for that, and I apologize and ask you to help me as I go forward to be less carnal. Anyway, if that's sin, you pray that God will forgive me. But I'm going to tell you something. If people in the world were as loving and as loyal and as forgiving as dogs are, our world would be a much better place. The famous historic humorist and television star by the name of Will Rogers said, quote, "If there are no dogs in heaven, then when I die, I want to go where they went," end of quote. And many of you that are listening understand what I'm describing, and for many of you, it's not a dog. It's a cat, or for some people, it's a herd of cats, or it's farm animals, or one of our viewers has a pet donkey. And many of you have various animals, rabbits. Kids have turtles, guinea pigs. I mean, the list is endless of pets that people have and love. And I've often said, by the way, do you know what the main difference is between a dog owner and a cat owner? Is that dogs have family, and as all cat owners know, cats have staff. But that just kind of gives you a little bit of a background as to our family and our history with pets. And I'm being honest with you. This is a question that I've asked, and this is a question that I've looked at in the Scriptures. And from this point forward, I'm going to walk you in to many of those passages that you've never seen concerning what God has said about proper relationship between humanity and the animal kingdom. Because there are some extreme groups on this earth that violate what God intended, and some on one side and some on the other. The truth be known, there are Christians who have unhealthy relationships with pets that violate, as you're going to learn, what the Bible teaches. But with that said, let's go back into the Bible and let's answer this first question. And this first question, for those that take systematic notes, what does the Bible say about how we should treat animals? And for that, let's go back into the book of Genesis. And for sake of history, isn't it unique that in the very first book of the Bible and the very first chapter of the Bible, in the creation and in the beginning of time, God speaks about animals and humanity? Genesis chapter 1, and go down to verse 24. Then God said, "Let the earth produce every sort of animal, each producing offspring of the same kind, livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and wild animals." And that is what happened. God made all sorts of wild animals, livestock, and small animals, each able to produce offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make human beings in our own image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground." Isn't it unique that God created animals and human beings on the sixth day and on the same day? God in the Bible, we see recorded, saved the sixth day not to create humanity alone, not just to create Adam and Eve, not to designate a special day for man being created in his own image, but He delegated that day to two acts of creation. First, He created the animals, and then on that sixth day, He did a second task. He created man in His own image. And I've always wondered, and obviously in this teaching there's going to be some room for wondering and thinking and your own views, although we will stay rooted in the Scripture as we move forward. But I have always wondered, as an animal lover, since animals and humans were created on the same day, could that be why most normal human beings have an affection towards pets or towards animals? So we see in the very first chapter of the Bible that God commanded man, created animals first, then created man in His own image, and then commanded man to take care of the animals under our care. He created us on the same day, the sixth day, and after He created man, after He had already created animals, He spoke to Adam and said, "It is your responsibility to provide proper care and authority over the animal kingdom." Did you know that the Bible also teaches us that caring for animals is a sign of godliness? Let's go into Proverbs chapter 12. And for some of you, this will be a new discovery, that how you treat animals is a test of your godliness. Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 10, the Bible says, "The godly care for their animals. But the wicked are always cruel. Now, I could put a lot of personal commentary in that, but since I'm teaching the Bible, I'll abstain from that, other than to say that oftentimes sinners and wicked people and cruelty to animals walk hand in hand. If you see, now this is biblical, this is not speculation, but if you see someone who is unkind or cruel or mean-spirited to an animal, then most oftentimes you can be guaranteed that they're not a godly person. Now again, the Bible spoke of various classes of animals, as we've already read in the first chapter of Genesis. Some of them were wild animals. And if we were to take the time, and that's not our teaching today, and so I'm not going to go down that road very far, other than to say God gave animals also in the wild kingdom as not only a part of maintaining ecosystems, but to provide food for man. And let me say something that I hope you'll never forget. Animals are not equal to man. Man is in authority and above the animals. But as you're going to see in multiple passages, God created a unique relationship of harmony to exist between humanity and the animal kingdom.
Nó là bao nhiêu thì đó là biên độ. Như vậy chúng ta nhìn vào đây, chúng ta thấy nó dao động chỉ từ đây lên tới đây thôi, hoặc từ vị trí này xuống tới vị trí này thôi. Đúng không ạ? Nó dao động trong cái đoạn này. Và từ vị trí cân bằng đến cái đoạn xa nhất là biên độ A. Đúng không? Đây là biên dương và đoạn này cũng là bằng luôn. Đây là biên âm, đúng chưa? Là trừ A. Như vậy, đầu tiên nhìn vào đồ thị, các bạn coi cái thằng nào lệch dài nhất thì thằng đó là biên độ. Thế thôi. Rồi, tiếp theo người ta có thể hỏi về pha. Ví dụ như người ta hỏi pha ban đầu đi. Đúng chưa? Pha ban đầu là chữ phi đó. Thì pha ban đầu này các em phải dựa vào điều kiện ban đầu cho thầy. Tức là điều kiện ban đầu, tức là tại điều kiện t bằng 0 nè. Chúng ta coi x0 nó bằng bao nhiêu. Đúng chưa? x0 nó bằng bao nhiêu. Và chúng ta có thể dựa vào đường tròn lượng z. Hoặc là chúng ta có thể tính trực tiếp cos phi này bằng x0 chia a cho thầy. Được chưa ạ? Và nếu ra ở chỗ này thì theo đúng toán học luôn, phi của chúng ta phải ra cộng trừ, giả sử như là một cái góc alpha nào đó. Và chúng ta muốn biết là lấy dấu cộng hay dấu trừ, tức là phi này bằng cộng góc alpha hoặc là trừ góc alpha, thì các bạn chú ý thêm một cái điều nữa. Nếu nó chuyển động theo chiều dương thì phi các bạn lấy nghiệp âm. Và ngược lại, nếu nó chuyển động theo chiều âm thì phi các bạn lấy là dương cho thầy. Được chưa? Đó là cách giải của chúng ta. Đó là cách thứ nhất, chúng ta tìm pha ban đầu. Thầy nhắc lại nha. Muốn tìm pha ban đầu, chúng ta phải dựa vào điều kiện ban đầu. Tức là tại điều kiện ban đầu này nè, cái thằng x0 này, vị trí ban đầu nó ở đâu? Ví dụ như cụ thể cái bài này đi, cái đồ thị này đi. Tại thời điểm ban đầu nó